we ended up with the boat fully upside down, sinking and on fire simultaneously. And we had a safety diver who wanted to dive into the front of the boat. You're going to really risk someone's life over saving a boat. 170 plus years later, it's just had the most amazing history of intrigue, espionage, technology. It's really drawn in the most incredible list of successful business people, syndicates of business people that are inspired by and want to win the America's Cup.
With less than a year to go, is it too early to say if you can win it or not? Well, this is all a bit weird because it's 8 o'clock UK time in the evening, my end, 9 o'clock Barcelona time, your end. We haven't spoken all day. And the first time we're speaking to each other is down the line in a podcast chat. Feels like we've got something wrong with our relationship that we need to sort out and address immediately. Well, we'll do it in half an hour after the podcast. But the point is, we can't...
Whatever it takes.
Yeah, well, we thought we'd have a brilliant high-profile guest on this week, but we've had a dropout, which is completely understandable. This happens in life. So instead, we thought, well, what can we talk about? I know we can talk to you and discuss the fact that we're only a year away from the America's Cup, which feels quite daunting now because we keep talking about it going on and on and on, but now it's almost here. So we can talk about that. And it'd be interesting, I suppose, to start by explaining what the hell it is, because you and I know what it is and the sailing audience knows what it is, but performance people might not necessarily in their numbers know what it is, and they'd be forgiven for doing so because it's a bit random as a competition. And it has had this sort of elitist tag stapled to it for 173 odd years. So just demystify what is the America's Cup for people that don't know.
Well, firstly, I've got to take issue with Cristiano for not fronting up for the pod. I don't know what he thinks he's doing in Saudi Arabia, but anyway, next time.
We wish.
But to answer your question, the America's Cup, yeah, it is the most incredible event. It really is, and the history of the event started in 1851. It was a race around the Isle of Wight. And the wealthy yacht owners from the Royal Yacht Squadron had an annual competition. And then a team were invited across by Prince Albert as part of the Royal Exhibition of 1851 to come and compete in this annual regatta around the Isle of Wight. And of course, the American boat came and trounced, I think it was 15 of the local yachts, and famously won this cup, which was called the 100-pound cup or the 100 Guineas Cup. There's a lot of conjecture around what it was actually called originally. Nevertheless, as only Americans can do, took it back to New York Harbor and renamed it the America's Cup. And that's where the history of the cup really started. And 170 plus years later, it's just had the most amazing history of intrigue, espionage, technology, and it's really drawn in the most incredible list of successful business people, syndicates of business people that are inspired by and want to win the America's Cup. So yeah, it's a very intriguing competition.
We always talk about the fact that sport's so binary. It is win or lose, and there's no sort of grey area in the middle, which is, I think, what makes it really attractive, especially in a world at the moment in which we're living, which is, there's lots of grey. So this binary win or lose thing that sport has in its armory is always really interesting. But the thing that the cup has, just to double down on that, is this brilliant expression, which there is no second, which I love. And I was looking at it earlier in terms of where that came from, that saying, there is no second. And it's got its own little backstory, hasn't it? Which involves Queen Victoria and the fleet of boats as they passed on the sort of home straight past the Royal Yacht Squadron in front of the Royal Yacht Squadron in Cowes in 1851. And she turned to the steward or whoever it was next to her and said, where I've actually got it in front of me. She said, "Say, Signal Master, are the yachts in sight?" And he said, "Yes, may it please your majesty." And she said, "Which is first?" And he said, "The America." And she said, "Which is second?" And he said, "Oh, your majesty, there is no second." I mean, it is brutal, isn't it? It's supposed to be this friendly competition, but it's anything but friendly.
Yeah, there's not. I mean, originally it was a friendly competition between yacht clubs. That's what the deed of gift, which was settled under the New York Supreme Court ultimately by a gentleman called George Schuyler. That's, in a way, that's what has kept the America's Cup so prevalent through all these years, is that it was and still is a friendly competition between yacht clubs. But as you say, it's anything but. It's one of the most cutthroat sporting competitions or undertakings that you could ever take on, because the winner effectively writes the rules, and that makes it incredibly difficult to win. If you have a defender, as we call it in the America's Cup, a winner or a defender that has really got their act together, then they're in the hot seat, and trying to dislodge them is just about as difficult sporting challenge as you'll ever find.
So if it's almost impossible to win, why bother trying?
Good question. For us, well, as a British team, it's about the history, the fact that we've never won it. I mean, it's the only major sporting trophy that Britain has never won. It's the oldest international sporting trophy. We're a very proud maritime nation. Of course we are. Everyone in the team is hugely motivated by that challenge, that desire to win the cup, be the first team to win the cup for Britain and bring it back where it started. I mean, that would be such a huge story in British sporting history and British maritime history.
And what would it mean for you to win it with a British flag flying on the boat? Because you won it for the Oracle team back in 2013. That in itself is a whole other podcast on that greatest comeback of all time, which it really was staggering. And that's a whole other thing to discuss another time. But in terms of what it would mean with a British flag flying, Jim as the benefactor, British billionaire backing it, what would that look like?
Yeah, that would be huge. I mean, for everyone in the team, Jim included, and Jim, John, and Andy, who are the three partners of INEOS, have made a huge investment into the team because they share that passion and also the challenge. You look at Jim in particular. There's an individual who, the harder the challenge, the more he is enticed by that. Doesn't matter what it is, whether it's sport or business or climbing mountains. He just loves a challenge, and it doesn't get any tougher than the America's Cup. So that's really ultimately the reason why he is supporting the team. But in terms of doing something valuable for Britain, from both a sporting standpoint, but also I think from we've had a tough time as a nation in the last 10 years with one or two major political shuffles that have either gone your way or against your way, depending on what your stance is. But it's not been an easy time for Britain, and we've seen some amazing sporting successes. If you look at the Lionesses, for example, and the cricket team, and many other Olympic teams, really representing Britain at the highest level and getting success. The America's Cup, I think, with the history of the event, if we can be successful in that would be a great achievement for British sport, but Britain in general.
One of the crazy things about the Cup is the defender they feature in this preliminary regatta phase, but they don't really feature again then until the actual cup match itself, the final. So this competition starts next year in Barcelona in August. And to take on the Kiwis, the challengers have got to get through, compete and scrap around with each other until that cup match where the challenger who ultimately beats all other challengers goes on to face the defender, the Kiwis, who are the holders, who are going for a three-peat, which has never happened in America's Cup history. So they've got plenty of motivation to win again. But this Challenger series that happens before that time, just talk through the teams that you're up against, because there's such kind of caliber and there's such credibility with each of those teams and what they bring to the party. And maybe let's start with our own team, and then we'll take each of them on individual merit. So let's start with, how we're set up to compete and the main key players in our organization, and what we've got in our armory, what we're sort of taking to the party.
Yeah, okay. So we're INEOS Britannia. We're effectively a third generation team now in the America's Cup. It's the first time, since Thomas Lipton, that we've had 3 consecutive campaigns for a British team. And the America's Cup continuity counts for a lot, because you have to develop the people, of course, but also in modern day design, certainly America's Cup design, Formula One design, technical sports, your simulation tools that you develop are absolutely critical to the end result. And that does take time to develop those and to be able to effectively ensure that those simulations are accurate. It takes a lot of time. So that's a big deal for our team. We also have this incredible partnership with Mercedes Formula One team, who've come in a major way to support us on and off the water, and certainly to help lead the technical team with, expertise and resource. And if you look at people like James Allison, there is an incredibly successful Formula One designer engineer who's a major part of leading our America's Cup technical team. Those are the sort of individuals that are involved, and that's, we hope really going to help us make that jump forwards and be able to take on the Kiwis. But time will tell just how much we're able to tap into that Formula One resource and optimize that and make the most out of that.
The other team using Formula One resource is Alinghi. So Ernesto Bertarelli's back, having been, I think, was he the only team, Alinghi team, the only team to win at the first time of asking when they won their first campaign? They've won 2 previously, right?
That's right. I mean, Ernesto Bertarelli, you've got to hand it to him. He's got an incredible history in the America's Cup.
And great dress sense.
First team.
He always looks impeccably chic.
How would I know? How would I know? You might be able to comment on that. I possibly couldn't. But incredible success in the America's Cup. As you say, first team to pitch up first time round and win it. And very, very smart, effectively hired the key talent from the winning team, the winning New Zealand team, both sailing and design talent, brought that across and created a really strong outfit in Alinghi. Won the Cup in 2003 and then defended it again in 2007 in what was, in modern America's Cups up until now in Barcelona, the most successful America's Cup on and off the water in terms of what that did for Valencia. The number of teams, had 10 teams for that event, huge turnout, commercially a real success. So Ernesto and his organization did a fantastic job really for developing the America's Cup. And you really have to give them credit for that. So they're now back after a hiatus of, some 10 years roughly. And they're going to be a strong outfit because they clearly know how to win it. They've got a really talented young Swiss team, sailing team, and they brought in some really experienced America's Cup design talent. And the Swiss, the sort of old adage of Swiss timing and Swiss accuracy, that's without a shadow of a doubt they're going to be an impressive outfit, and they could well surprise a lot of us.
Yeah. And of course, they're working with Red Bull Racing. So that's going to count for something as well. And there'll be natural comparisons made against your setup and their setup, no doubt, with the Formula One inputs from both. What about the Americans? Because the Americans always bring everything, all guns are blazing to the party. So they obviously had a capitulation last time out, and the boat completely collapsed. And they had a horrible capsize and never really got back on track, did they, after that incident in New Zealand? So they're back for this event. Terry Hutchinson's still running the show there. What do you think they're going to look like?
Yeah, look, American Magic actually put together a really solid campaign for the last America's Cup, and they were undone by, like you said, a really unfortunate windward mark incident, without getting too technical, in sailing parlay, where they had a couple of issues and completely pretty much wrote off the boat and the campaign in one maneuver gone wrong. And that, just like any other sport, you're right on the edge of you're right on the limit a lot of the time of pushing these boats, and it doesn't take much to go wrong, and you can effectively end your campaign like that. So they were very unlucky in the last Cup. For that was their first campaign as a new organisation. Although they competed in other professional sailing circuits, that was the first time competing for the America's Cup, and they did a really good job. And they've learned from that. They've got similar leadership, poured in a lot of new talent. I guess most notably Thomas Slingsby, who's come out of winning the last 2 or 3 seasons of Sail GP, and is a huge talent in the sport. So yeah, on and off the water, they've got a very strong outfit. Terry Hutchinson is a real solid campaigner, and they've got a strong team. They're going to be a real force. Again, like Alinghi, like a lot of these teams, ourselves included, huge amounts is going to depend on how well we've done the technical piece, and then as a sailing team, how good a job can we do of optimizing the boat once it gets in the water, and working with the design teams to figure out what's important to really get 100% out of the yacht and the performance of the team.
A couple of other teams, just to sort of finish up on the teams front. So you've got also the French, the Orient Express team, kind of a late entry, but they were punching in the preliminary regatta that we had recently. So what do you think they're going to be like?
The French team, Orient Express, are very much the dark horses of this next Cup, because they've been very savvy. They've come in late, realised that they haven't got time to design a yacht themselves, and struck a pretty incredible deal with the Kiwis, whereby they get the design package of Team New Zealand. Of course, that helps Team New Zealand. That's more income into their team, their organisation, to fund the campaign. But for the French, they will get pretty much the full package. The big question for them is, can they get that on the water quickly enough to learn how to sail it in time for the Challenger Series? Because, like you said earlier, the Kiwis will race in the preliminary regatta. They will race in the early round to the Challenger Series, but they've got a free pass to the final. The French have actually, if they're going to get to the final, they've got to win the Challenger Series. The question is, can they get to grips with the boat early enough, quickly enough, to really optimize, get the full potential out of that boat? That's a big question mark with the French. But if they can do, and they've got a really talented young sailing team led by Quentin de la Pierre, if they can do, then they could end up in the final.
Okay, and finally the Italians, who you can never dismiss because they always show up looking the part, and they were the runners-up last time. So what do you think their chances are, and how hard they're going to be to beat?
Yeah, it always feels a bit awkward talking about your competition, and it might seem like I'm just trying to be nice about everyone, but genuinely they're all incredibly strong teams. And Prada has a huge history in the America's Cup. Yes, they do always look good as well on and off the water, but they're an impressive outfit. with that history in the Cup, they're well led. They've got a great design team, sailing team. Jimmy Spithill, Francesco Bruni leading the sailing team, and some really exciting new young Italian sailing talent, Olympic gold medalists joining the campaign. So they're going to be really tough to beat. And the thing I would say about Luna Rossa is that probably for, I would say, the first campaign in a long time, they said, you know what, we don't want to be the challenger of record. We don't want to really have much to do with the running of this competition. We're just going to keep our heads down and do our campaign, do what we think's right, and get on with it. And that's actually quite worrying, because it means that they probably are doing just that, and they may well be working a few things out that the rest of us might have missed and doing a good job. So yeah, they're going to be tough. They're going to be a good team.
Yeah, well, one of the things they did do last time, and it's a bit like when the Kiwis turned up in Bermuda on bikes, where everyone else was on arm grinders. The Prada Italian team turned up last time as a twin helm, which is now what everyone's doing. So just let's just talk about that for a moment. The idea that you're now going to be twin helming with Giles on the other side of the boat. So how does that work? How do you does one person lead and the other person follow, or do you share the responsibilities? I mean, how do you divvy up the workload so that you get the best out of yourselves, the team and the boat?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's not just Giles and myself. The whole boat will be split tack to tack, and some of the other roles they might be doing, we don't know yet. Ultimately, they might be doing a particular role on one tack, and they might switch when the boat turns through the wind and ends up on another tack. We've got to figure that out. In terms of who takes the lead, it actually becomes quite clear, and the people that sail on these boats will know what I'm talking about. That the boats are so difficult to sail that you only have so much bandwidth when you're on a particular tack. It's pretty clear ultimately who's making the decisions, and the communication needs to be really clear between the decision makers on board the boat and the people that are either steering the boat or trimming the boat or flying the boat. And once you sort of figure that out and get that communication going, then it sort of flows. But it does require a good relationship, a really strong relationship with everyone on board the boat, because that choreography is absolutely key. If one person misses their beat and doesn't quite make that adjustment to the boat at a critical time, then that can cost you not 10 meters, it could cost you a couple of 100 meters. I mean, it's that brutal, really. The performance of these boats, they're going so fast. They're going to be sitting at around 50 knots of boat speed quite regularly in this next America's Cup. And if you are ever so slightly off your performance targets, you're going to be losing a huge amount of distance. So, yeah, it's a big team effort.
And just talk through what it's like to step onto. Someone said to me the other day, do you ever get nervous watching Ben on these boats? I said, actually, I don't get nervous when you're in the competition, because I feel by that point you've kind of got it nailed. You know what's going to happen. You've got some sort of reading of what the boat can or can't do. But the bit I don't like very much is this testing window where you're trying different things out and you're pushing the boundaries and the limits. So how do you know? Because surely you've got to push the boundaries and the limits to know how far you can go with it. But how do you know when to pull back from that and then when to just push harder?
Well, we rely a lot on the technical team, because they're doing the really difficult studies to figure out what the acceptable strain limits are on the boat and the components. And we have a huge number of strain gauges on these boats to try and figure out just what loads they're under. And as we put the boat through its paces, we have inevitably end up with alarms going off constantly. And you've got to figure out what alarms actually make a difference, and you might actually need to stop the boat for, and other alarms that you can kind of ignore. And we're constantly in a communication loop with the engineering team to figure that out. So again, team effort, and you have faith. We have a huge amount of faith in our technical team, our engineering team, that they understand the limitations of the boat, and we've got to, it's like being a test pilot, really. In those early days, you got to figure out how hard to push, and knowing that when someone tells you to stop, you need to stop, and that's how it works. But it's a fascinating challenge like that, and it's great. It's really neat in a way that you have to go through those processes, and you're very reliant on the technical team, and it's really their game at that point to make sure that you're designing, developing, manufacturing a reliable package that then you can get on the water and start optimizing and try and get it to somewhere near 100% of what its design capabilities are.
When was the last time that you scared yourself completely shitless on board one of these things?
I don't know about being scared shitless, but the last moment that we had an issue was when we capsized our test boat in Palma in Mallorca last winter, and it wasn't necessarily being scared about going super fast or something like that, but it was an incident that snowballed for a number of different reasons, that ended up with this crazy situation where the boat was fully inverted or upside down. At that point, the front hatch of the boat had been taken off because we had to try and lower without getting too technical. We were trying to control the foil arms manually to try and keep the boat from going upside down. So that hatch came off just as the boat went over. So the boat was then sinking, taking water in the bow. And these boats are powered, or the test boats at least, are powered by battery power or lithium-ion batteries. And anyone that's an expert in lithium-ion batteries will tell you that they don't react that well to salt water. So we ended up with the boat fully upside down, sinking, and on fire simultaneously. And that was the most insane moment I think I've ever been in. And unfortunately, I've had a few moments in my sailing career, but that was definitely the most insane. And trying to help manage that, and we had a safety diver who wanted to dive into the front of the boat to try and put an airbag in there to stop the boat sinking. And at that moment, you're sort of trying to weigh up, should you let this guy go in there, because there's plenty going on. We don't know if the batteries are actually, being dislodged, or what's flying around in the front of the boat, and it's sinking, and you're going to really risk someone's life over saving a boat. And there was a moment there where ultimately you got to kind of make a decision and weigh up the odds of what's important. Thankfully, Martin, who was the diver, did an incredible job, did what he was trained to do, got in there, got the airbag into the boat, and was a big reason why we managed to save the boat and in a way the campaign, because that test boat is critical to our learning and development. So that was a major issue for the campaign. And all of these teams will have had their moments, or they will have their moments through this America's Cup. We talked about American Magic in the last Cup, that they had that major moment in the competition where they effectively wrote off their race boat. So you got to try and manage those, react to those, come back from those setbacks. And thankfully that wasn't, whilst it was a setback, it wasn't a campaign ending setback.
Yeah, Grant Dalton, who's the boss of the Kiwi Challenge, said if you're not breaking stuff, you're not probably pushing hard enough. And I think there is some real truism, isn't there, in that, which technical sports must find across the board, whether it be Formula One or what you're doing. I remember when that happened, that event that you've just recalled happened, and I got a call from one of the media team to say, don't panic, they're all fine. which point I was like, panic, what about? And then turned on all the social channels to discover that, the boat's sinking, it's on fire, people were underwater, don't worry, final line, everyone's fine. It's like, and there is this risk reward thing, isn't there? Taken to the most extreme of measures in a technical sport like yours. And you do have things to weigh up on a constant basis. In terms of the countdown, which is now very much on to the next cup, and to next August when the whole thing starts. What happens before then, and where are the key moments in the campaign? Because we've already had Villanova, which was, by your own admission, an unmitigated disaster. We should probably just touch on that. And then we've got coming up Jeddah, which is another prelim event in the AC40 boat, which will be the youth and women's cup boats when they race at the cup proper. And then you've got the Barcelona event, which is the prelim regatta, but that's in the AC75. So that's a different sort of, in my mind anyway, that's sort of a different thing altogether. But what is it in your mind, and how important is it to redress the balance of a disastrous Villanova with a good Jeddah?
Yeah, so if you look at the timeline between now and the Cup, which like you said, starts in late August next year, we have another preliminary event, which is held in the AC40, which is a one design version of the America's Cup boat, a smaller version, 40 foot. The America's Cup boat is obviously 75 foot. So that will be another opportunity for teams to come together, primarily fleet racing, which is very different to the America's Cup, where we'll be match racing. So it'll be 1-on-1. So different format of competition. Ultimately, those races don't count for anything. They don't even count for, points for the Challenger Series. But they are important in terms of, a team's confidence. Talked about the design and technical teams working incredibly long hours, hard hours to put the best possible boat they can on the water. And they want to know that they've got a sailing team that can perform and can compete at the highest level. So that is really what counts there. And of course, it's a great opportunity for the Cup to showcase the competition in the build up to the main event. So that will take place in December. Then the big deal will be for teams getting their race boats on the water. There's the 175 footer that they can build in these campaigns. Those boats will go in the water sometime late spring, early summer next year. And then there'll be this rush of a build up to the competition, like I say, in late August. And that will be a really critical time. So the first preliminary regatta in the 75 footers will tell us a huge amount about who's going to be successful or not in this America's Cup, because other than the Kiwis who are straight into the finals, the other teams, ourselves included, if you're not fast, if you're not competitive at that preliminary regatta, you've got very little time to do much about it. And you frankly, you won't, you won't be, you very likely won't even get to the final. So that's going to be a big moment for all of the teams. And you touched on our performance in Villanova, the first preliminary event where we were last. I think it's the first time I've ever been last in a one design class of boat. So it's not something that any of us in the team, myself included, take lightly. There are a number of reasons without going into details or trying to make excuses for that, but ultimately we didn't sail well enough. That's really the biggest factor behind that. And it's, something that, like I said, doesn't sit well with the team. So we're putting focus into how do we improve our performance in that one design boat for the event in Jeddah in early December. But at the same time, not taking our eye off what's important in terms of the continued development of our test boat T6 and the rest of the campaign to give ourselves the fastest AC75 next summer. So those are the balances that all of the teams are up against, and we're no different. All the other teams will be trying to find that balance. And for us, it's important that we put on a better show in Jeddah, but it's also really important that we have a fast boat for the Cup next summer.
What was your team talk like after that Villanova weekend where things didn't go according to plan? What did you say to everyone?
Well, it was really important for us as a team to identify that there were a lot of reasons behind it, but we can't look for excuses. Ultimately, it wasn't acceptable. No professional sports team is going to be accepting with finishing in last place. I mean, that's just if you were happy if you were happy with that. What's the saying? If you show me someone's happy with losing, show me a loser. I mean, that's just it's none of our makeup. So yeah, we were really pissed off, of course, but at the same time, trying to react in the right way. If we just threw our toys out of the pram and said, right, okay, we're going to ditch everything else and all we're going to do is focus on the AC40 between now and the event in Jeddah, that would be a big mistake, because we'd be taking our eye off the ball from the testing and development of what's ultimately really going to make the biggest difference is having a fast boat or not next summer. So yeah, that's the challenges of being in these teams and leading these teams, is you got to find that balance and keep everyone, on point and focused. It's certainly not a blame culture. If anyone wants to blame out of that, it would be myself. But we take it on the chin and actually use it as motivation to really work harder and come back stronger and do a better job next time around.
Just finally as well, who's to say that, here's a thought, your strategy is right and everyone else's is wrong? Because everybody else is focused on the AC40 as their test boat, as opposed to the direction that you guys have taken, which is all about T6. So how about that as a thought?
Yeah, I mean, you could make that argument, but I think that's probably slightly rose-tinted spectacles, because all of the teams have their different approaches to testing and development. It just so happens that ourselves and Luna Rossa didn't go down the route of using the AC40. We decided to build our own test boats, rightly or wrongly. Time will tell whether that's the right thing to do. But I certainly wouldn't use that as an excuse as to why we underperformed in Villanova. We just clearly didn't put enough time into that boat. And yeah, I think that the key always to the Cup is developing the fastest boat. Pretty much in the history of the Cup, the fastest boat has always won. But funnily enough, it's always tended to have the best sailors in it as well, because they've been a big part of helping to develop that boat. And that's what you're looking for. So yeah, we've learned a lot from that. Not a lot, we've learned a huge amount from that, actually. As frustrating as it was, it's really shown us in some areas where we were potentially not up to speed and we were lacking. And that's undoubtedly going to help us for the Cup next summer. As frustrating, as difficult, as painful as that was. So we can be stronger for it as long as we really, learn from those issues and adapt to that and come together as a team, which I'm confident that we will do.
So final question is, with less than a year to go, is it too early to say if you can win it or not?
Yeah. Honestly, if you asked anyone, in these other teams, they'd be lying if they said they were confident they were going to win, or if they had any idea. Ultimately, there's 6 really strong teams. Of course, the Kiwis are in a hot seat because they're in the final, but it's going to be one of the most hotly contested America's Cups ever. And I honestly can tell you, all you can do is focus on your own team, keep an eye on the opposition, of course, but focus on your own team, trying to get your program right, trying to execute, keep everyone together, keep pushing hard, keep working hard, and, just make the most out of every day on the water and make the most out of eventually the race boat and bring it together at the right time. So not that dissimilar to any other sport really, but just quite quite a lot more complex and a lot more expensive.